The gray Icelandic fog swallowed the B-24 Liberator whole. Inside the shuddering fuselage, Lieutenant General Frank Andrews, the senior American commander in Europe, was heading home. It was just after noon on May 3, 1943, and the aircraft known as Hot Stuff was descending blindly through the murk, its crew unaware of the dark slope of Mount Fagradalsfjall rising directly into their path. In minutes, the plane would strike the mountain at nearly 200 miles per hour. With Andrews died 13 others, and with them died a future written in secret memos and private understandings. For General George Marshall, Andrews was not merely a commander, he was the chosen one, being groomed for the greatest command of the war, the invasion of Normandy. Everyone knows Eisenhower, the face of victory. This is the story of the man who was supposed to be in his place and the command that vanished into the fog. Everyone knew the infantry was the Army's soul. The Air Corps was a scouting arm, a messenger service. But Frank Andrews saw a different future. He became the evangelist for a radical idea: strategic air power. He envisioned fleets of long-range, four-engine bombers that could fly beyond the front lines, striking an enemy's industrial heart and will to fight before the first ground troops ever clashed. It was a theory of war that bypassed the trenches altogether, and to the old guard, it was heresy. In 1935, Andrews got his chance to prove it. He was given command of the new GHQ Air Force, the first consolidated American air strike force. His weapon was the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress, a revolutionary aircraft with the range and payload to make his vision real. Andrews fought with every fiber of his being, for funding, for production lines, for the very soul of the service. He wasn't just fighting for planes, he was fighting for the idea that air power could be decisive, that it could win wars. He championed it relentlessly, pushing for a force that could dominate the skies over any battlefield or any continent. His advocacy was a crusade, and it made him powerful enemies within a ground-first army establishment. They watched this zealous airman and his flying fortresses with deep suspicion. The battle lines were drawn, not over some foreign shore, but in the committee rooms of Washington. Their suspicion hardened into action. The ground establishment had tolerated Andrews's crusade for long enough. His vision of an independent air arm, his relentless push for the B-17, his talk of winning wars from the skies, it was a direct threat to their budgets, their doctrine, their very primacy. In 1939, they struck. The command of the GHQ Air Force, the platform from which he had preached his gospel of strategic bombing, was taken from him. With it went his temporary rank of Major General. Frank Andrews was reverted to his permanent rank of Colonel. The message was brutal and clear. He was not a visionary, but an overreaching subordinate. The punishment was exile. They sent him to San Antonio, Texas, to serve as the air officer for the 8th Corps area. It was a desk job, a bureaucratic backwater, a professional burial. The man who had commanded the cutting edge of American air power was now shuffling papers in a regional headquarters. The prophet was silenced. The waste was staggering. Here was one of the Army's most forward-thinking officers at the very moment the world was tipping into war, relegated to administrative oblivion. His ideas were shelved. His career seemed over. In the echoing halls of the War Department, the old guard likely considered the matter closed. They had clipped the wings of the most dangerous bird in their aviary and grounded him in Texas dust. But the story was not over. In September 1939, as war erupted in Europe, a new chief of staff took charge of the U.S. Army. George C. Marshall was a different kind of officer. He valued talent over conformity, and he had a long memory for injustice. He looked at the roster of sidelined officers and saw a name that didn't belong on it: Frank Andrews. With characteristic decisiveness, Marshall plucked the grounded colonel from his Texas desk and brought him back to Washington. It was a lifeline, but Marshall's method was not charity. It was a test. He believed in proving a man under fire, and he gave Andrews real commands. First came the Caribbean Defense Command, headquartered in Panama. This was no backwater. It was the strategic choke point of the Western Hemisphere, a vital logistical theater guarding the canal. Andrews mastered it. Next, Marshall sent him even farther afield, to command U.S. forces in the Middle East. This was a diplomatic and strategic minefield, requiring a delicate touch with allies and a firm grasp of global supply lines. Again, Andrews excelled. With each successful posting, Marshall's confidence solidified. Here was a man who could handle immense complexity, who could command joint forces on a truly global scale. The officer once deemed too radical for the Army was being forged by Marshall into the model of a modern theater commander. The rescue was complete. The preparation had begun. Now, with Eisenhower gone to North Africa, the springboard for Europe lay vacant. Marshall's choice was clear. In February 1943, Lieutenant General Frank Andrews took command of the European Theater of Operations. He moved into Eisenhower's old office at 20 Grosvenor Square, London. His task was creation. He was to build the physical platform for the largest invasion in history from the ground up. Ports to receive the flood of men and machines, airfields to host the coming armadas of aircraft, vast depots for fuel, ammunition, and supplies, training grounds to harden the armies. Every plank and pier, every runway and road pointed toward one objective: the cross-channel assault. Operation Overlord. Andrews oversaw the furious construction, the logistical tide turning Britain into a vast armed camp. He was, in Marshall's eyes, the leading candidate to command that very invasion when the time came. The man who had fought for the tools of strategic reach was now building their launchpad. In London, he worked with a quiet intensity, transforming the theoretical into the tangible. The blueprint was becoming a bastion. The war's entire center of gravity was shifting to his theater, to his responsibility. Everything he did now was a down payment on D-Day. And so, in the spring of 1943, Frank Andrews was exactly where George Marshall needed him to be. Marshall, the Chief of Staff, was a master of quiet preparation. Privately, he had already made a monumental decision. He regarded Andrews as his leading candidate to command Operation Overlord, the coming invasion of France. Marshall would later say Andrews was the only potential commander he had a chance to prepare all around. The logic was cold and clear. Eisenhower was still mired in the Mediterranean, finishing the North African campaign. Andrews was already in London, commanding all U.S. forces in the European theater. He was already building the relationships with British commanders that a supreme Allied command would demand. The greatest command of the war in the West was, in Marshall's unspoken plan of succession, effectively already his. Andrews was the heir apparent, already operating from the throne room. Every meeting, every logistical decision, every strained alliance he navigated was a rehearsal for the main event. The command was not yet official, but in the minds of the few who held the future, it was his destiny. The path was set. And then, with the war's most pivotal role waiting just over the horizon, it all vanished in an Icelandic fog. If you think the man who built the weapon deserves to be remembered as more than a name on a runway, take a second to hit like and subscribe, because how this future was taken from him is the part almost no one knows. The report from Iceland is troubling. Construction is lagging. Supply lines are snarled. Morale is fraying in that relentless, isolating cold. You know the island's value. It's the vital air bridge, the thin, frozen tether linking America's industrial might to Britain's besieged shores. A problem there is a kink in the entire lifeline. You could send a deputy, you could wait for a fuller briefing, but you built your career on seeing things for yourself, on trusting your own eyes over a staff officer's summary. Every day you wait is a day the enemy consolidates. The forecast for Reykjavik is marginal, fog creeping in from the sea. Your aide suggests a postponement. It's a sensible voice. But this is the real calculus of command. Lose 2 critical days to caution, or trust your veteran pilot and the rugged frame of your B-24, the hot stuff. The machine has flown harder routes. The crew is seasoned. The war does not pause for weather. You make the decision that has defined you. You go. You board the aircraft. The four engines cough to life, then settle into a familiar, thunderous rhythm. The Liberator lumbers down the runway, heavy with fuel and purpose, and lifts into the damp English sky. The channel passes beneath you, then the gray expanse of the Atlantic. You are going to see it for yourself, to fix it, because that is what you do. The horizon ahead softens, blurring into a wall of mist. That mist becomes everything. Over Iceland, the weather collapses completely. The cloud is down to the deck, a suffocating gray that swallows the world. Mountains are hidden. The B-24 Liberator, hot stuff, is low now, navigating almost blind. It makes repeated attempts to find the field near Reykjavik. It descends, turns, climbs, descends again. The crew strains against the void, instruments and instinct their only guides in the all-consuming gray. Each pass is a gamble with the unseen earth. The tension is a physical weight in the cabin. Then, a shape, a dark shape out of the mist. A solid wall where there should be only sky, a heartbeat. No time to pull up, no time to scream. The mountain no one saw. It struck Mount Fagradalsfjall at roughly 200 miles per hour. The impact was catastrophic, a brutal merger of metal and rock and fog. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the groan of settling wreckage and the Icelandic wind. Of the 15 men on board, only one survived. Tail Gunner Sergeant George Isel was thrown clear from the shattered fuselage. He lived to tell of the gray, the turns, the sudden end. The man who was to command the invasion of Europe was gone. Frank Maxwell Andrews, George Marshall's chosen instrument, the architect waiting for his final blueprint, was dead on a remote Icelandic hillside. The command, now vacant, would pass to another. The story of the war was about to be rewritten, by a different hand. The news reached Washington like a physical blow. For George Marshall, it was more than the loss of a trusted officer, it was the loss of a design, a chosen instrument for the war's most critical hour. The machinery of war, relentless, ground forward. There was no time for a prolonged search. Dwight Eisenhower, triumphant from North Africa, was the obvious, the only choice. He stepped into Andrews's vacant office in London, assuming command of the European theater. By December of that same year, Eisenhower was formally named Supreme Allied Commander for Operation Overlord. The path was set. Eisenhower would become the architect of D-Day, a liberator, a president. His face defined an era. Andrews receded into the footnotes, a promising might have been. We can never know with certainty if Andrews would have ultimately been given the invasion command, though Marshall's own words leave little doubt he was the intended candidate. Nor can we know if he would have matched Eisenhower's deft political touch or his strategic execution. But Marshall, a man not given to sentiment, believed he was the best man for the job. That belief died on an Icelandic mountainside. The narrative of victory found a new, enduring author. And so the final, profound irony settles over Frank Andrews' story. The man who fought for an independent, strategic air force, who saw the bomber as the ultimate war-winning weapon, is now immortalized chiefly as a place where airplanes park. Andrews Air Force Base. The name is spoken by millions, a fixture of the news, the home of Air Force One. It is a logistical hub, a piece of asphalt, a noun. The man has vanished into the title. The architect faded into the foundation, while the tenant of his London office, Dwight Eisenhower, stepped into the light of history. Eisenhower became Supreme Commander, the face of D-Day, the President. Andrews won no great battles on a field. He lost everything to a mountain and a memory. This is the hidden stratagem, the ultimate weapon that outlasts every gun and every general. The most dangerous weapon in war is not the sharpest blade or the largest army. It is the story that gets remembered afterward, and who gets to tell it. Here is the part that stays with me. We build our monuments to the men who are standing on the deck when the credits roll, the ones who happen to be there at the end. Frank Andrews built the stage. He walked to the very edge of the greatest role of the war. And then a mountain in the fog decided he would never say a single line. Maybe Eisenhower was always the better choice. Maybe Andrews would have stumbled where Ike soared. We will never know, and that is the cruel heart of it. History does not always remember the man who was ready. It remembers the man who was there. So let me leave it with you. If that fog had lifted for 10 more seconds, if Andrews had lived, do you think we would know his name today the way we know Eisenhower's? Or was he always destined to be a footnote? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and if these are the stories you come here for, the name's history quietly filed away, then subscribe and stay with me, because there is always another name hiding behind the one everyone remembers, and we are only getting started.